Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Saints football, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Mike Hoss along with John DeShazer. Sean Kelly is with the Pelicans in New York, so we'll just let this stand for whatever it is.
We needed to fill in.
We needed to fill in, and Tommy the Turkey is happy to do so on a huge Thursday night game for both football teams. The Saints 9-1, winners of 9 straight against the Atlanta Falcons, 4-6. It's the NFC South. The Saints looking to really sweep the season. Hasn't happened a whole lot of times in the last 12 years with these two football teams. An important game for both teams, but kind of for different reasons.
Yeah, the Falcons are trying to get off the schneid. They've lost 2 straight. They're really reeling, so to speak. I lost a tough home game to Dallas last week, and so they're in a position to where they're just struggling, trying to stay afloat. Meanwhile, the Saints, 9 straight wins. They're trying to lock down the NFC South, and not just that, they've got to keep step with the Rams. Rams only have 1 loss. Saints trying to maintain where they have 1 loss because they have the tiebreak.
But it's amazing to be 9-1 and play as well as this football team is playing and really not have any cushion anywhere. You look at the Rams, because this is what fans do. They play the Lions, then the Bears, then I think it's Seattle, Arizona, San Francisco. So if it's not in the next couple of weeks, you could very easily see the Rams going 15-1. So the Saints mentally have to keep the edge that they have.
Well, this is the NFL. In most sports, the surest way to take care of your business is to take care of your own business.
Right.
Relying on outside help is a dicey proposition. Now, the Rams, this is the NFL, so the Lions might jump up and get them. The way the Bears are playing, I'd say the Bears have a fair to middling chance to get them, but you can't depend on anything in the NFL. So certainly, if you looked at it Monday night, you think, well, maybe the Chiefs will give us some help. Well, the Chiefs did the best they could. They scored 51, but they give up 54. So you get in a situation where basically you have to handle your own business, and that's where the Saints are.
And this football team, and we say this almost every week when we're talking about this, is playing at a level that you almost hard to continue to expect, yet each week they continue to do so. And it's not one guy on offense and one guy on defense. It is literally offense, defense, and special teams.
I'll tell you what, Mike, I think for about 6-7 straight weeks now, I've said they played their best game of the season today. And that's a tribute to what these guys are doing. Defensively, we've seen the communication get better in the secondary. Adding Eli Apple gives you another corner who can cover. Doesn't have to cover as well as Marshawn Lattimore, but he just has to be very adequate, and they've gotten another guy who can do that. Certainly offensively, these guys have been clicking from the beginning, but now when you add in Traquan Smith as a number 2 receiver behind Michael Thomas, you bring Mark Ingram back to that offense in the running game. And now with Mark Ingram, they average, I think in the 6 games, about 144 rushing yards per game with Mark Ingram. All of a sudden, everything is clicking. Special teams, Will Lutz has only missed 1 field goal attempt this season. Thomas Morstead, if he had enough attempts, would be at a Pro Bowl level, but he's not getting a lot of kicks.
He's only had 21 punts.
Yeah, and they're doing fantastic in coverage outside a couple of kickoffs the last 2 games. But for the most part, everything on this team is clicking the way they want it to.
You look back to that Week 3 game in Atlanta. Saints win it in overtime, took that opening kickoff of overtime, drove down and scored. And I look back at that as a statement game, and you go, well, wait a minute. They'd already beaten Cleveland the week before, but they looked in disarray, and I think they would say that against Tampa. They did beat Cleveland, but the way they played against Atlanta, I thought that was their statement game. They beat the Giants the following week, and certainly 9 straight, but I feel like that gave them the confidence that they are showing today.
I thought that propelled them. They didn't play as well as they wanted to play against Cleveland. In fact, Cleveland missed about 4 kicks, 2 field goals, 2 PATs to lose that game, and the Saints didn't feel good about that win at all. Winning that Atlanta game, and the way they won it. Now, they won it 43-37 in overtime, but the defensive secondary was in transition. If you remember, P.J. Williams started for Ken Crawley, who had been ineffective. Then P.J. Williams was so ineffective, they had to bring Ken Crawley back in. Then Patrick Robinson got hurt in that game. And so I think since that game, the secondary has gotten itself together a little bit. Again, added Eli Apple in the trade. And I think that game really, you knew what the offense was, because the offense said basically they had to take over that game. But defensively, I think they kind of figured some things out in that game defensively, and it has shown since then.
And if you look back to that game, there was no Mark Ingram. He was sat out the first 4 games. And Taysom Hill was Taysom Hill, but not certainly the weapon that he can be on offense now if you're looking to defend him. So even though if you had to pick one team to play on a short week, it would probably be the Falcons, because you know so much about them, and the Saints as well. But this, because of Mark and because of Tatum, it is a different to prepare for.
Totally different because Taysom Hill can line up, at tailback. He can line up at tight end. He can line up at quarterback. He can line up at receiver. There's nowhere he can't line up except actual offensive linemen. And then Mark Ingram gives them that tough running to pair with Alvin Kamara. They are such a fantastic 1-2 punch. And the Saints were missing that the first 4 games. Now, Alvin Kamara was extremely productive in those games, but he took a tremendous beating in those games also, and Mark Ingram helps alleviate that.
And we expect to have Marcus Davenport back along that defensive front. Traquan Smith coming off of his phenomenal game, a little banged up. Expect him to play again, short week, but it's because, and Dan Arnold. I mean, and here's what I talked to some of the guys in the locker room about on Sunday, which, by the way, feels like just yesterday. And that was Austin Carr and Keith Kirkland and those kind of guys that Drew has to have confidence in them and their routes before he's going to go there and not look to Michael Thomas every time. And I feel like that's happening.
Yeah, I think specifically he mentioned talking to those guys after the first series last week against the Eagles saying, look, if they're going to double team Michael Thomas every play, every down, then you guys, I got to come to you and you guys have to be ready. And they were ready. Keith Kirkwood has come off the practice squad and played extremely well. Traquan Smith, we saw some of this in the preseason. We didn't know if he could carry it over to the regular season. We've seen 2 games, one against Washington and then last week against Philadelphia, where he has shown star-type potential. Then Dan Arnold, the converted wide receiver at tight end, and Austin Carr. So he's got guys, and the thing with Drew is if you're open, he's going to throw it to you. So you got to get open, but he will trust you and throw it to you.
And this team has done such a phenomenal job of living in the moment, and quite frankly, you understand why. After this Thursday, they go 3 straight on the road. We're not back here until December 23rd with Carolina, and then it's Carolina, Pittsburgh, Carolina, if I've got that right, yeah. And so it's Dallas on the road, 3 on the road. It is a very tough road ahead for this football team.
Yeah, they can't afford to look ahead. I guarantee you, they can't afford to look to next Thursday against Dallas. They've done a really good job of focusing. A lot of that has had to do with them kind of getting themselves together, play into their capability, and a lot of it has had to do with the schedule. I don't know if it's necessarily fortunate, but you can't slack when you're playing Baltimore and then Minnesota and then the Rams and then going on the road against Cincinnati, which was 5-3 at the time and coming off a bye, and then coming home against the Super Bowl champion Eagles. Even though they were 4-5, they're still the Super Bowl champs. So they had a lot of things to keep their attention.
The Falcons always stun me. I mean, they're the best. They got to be the best 4-6 team out there. You watch them play, you're like, how does anybody stop these guys? And they just kind of, I don't know, they just kind of clunk it up sometimes. But they're such a dangerous football team. And to be 12 and 13-point favorites over the Atlanta Falcons, I mean, I don't believe in trap games, but, man, this football team, the Falcons, can do a lot of good things still at 4-6.
Well, 12, 13-point favorites, even at home, even on a short week, I think is absurd. We're talking about a division team that hates your guts and would like nothing better than to snap that 9-game winning streak. And with Matt Ryan at quarterback, 3,000-plus yards, 22 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Julio Jones, 73 catches, 1,100 yards. Calvin Ridley, who already has 7 touchdown receptions. And then Tevin Coleman running the football. They have enough weapons to just keep it close by scoring the football because they've got a fantastic offense. They won't have Deion Jones playing linebacker today. That helps the Saints, and we know that secondary was banged up the first time the Saints played them. But still, they score enough to keep it interesting.
Certainly a must-win for them at 4-6, and they can certainly put points on the board. And if you're Sean Payton, you're looking for that little motivation. You say, I believe that we were like 14-point favorites over Tampa in the opening week of the season.
Yes.
We know how that turned out. So, point spreads are point spreads, and coaches certainly don't talk about it a lot. Big week to be at home, short week. And when you look at this game, and we always look to what strengths for the Saints, weaknesses for the Falcons. And you might say, well, maybe run offense for the Saints is a strength. The Falcons have given up a bunch of touchdowns defensively. What are you looking at today to be kind of the key?
Well, I want to see if the Saints, because I don't have any qualms or any concerns about the Saints offensively right now. The way they're going, I just think they're going to do their thing. But defensively, we've seen them progress a ton these last 3-4 weeks. And you won't shut down Atlanta's offense, I don't think. But you do have some capabilities to get into the quarterback with Sheldon Rankins and Marcus Davenport and Cam Jordan. You do have some guys in the secondary who cover better with Marshawn Lattimore and Eli Apple and P.J. Williams in the slot. So I want to see how those guys match up. As usual, they need to get off the field on third down. They need to get third down stops, get the offense back to football, and watch Drew Brees and those guys work. They had difficulty getting off the field in Atlanta. Atlanta shredded this secondary in Atlanta. Let's see how much they've improved.
And finally, we see it every week. We saw it earlier today, Detroit and Chicago, and that's turnovers. And in the last 3 games, this team has jumped to +5.
Yes.
And 1, they're not turning it over. And 2, they're getting turnovers, and it is a game changer week in and week out.
It's scary, too, because they're playing so clean. You know that there's got to be something to happen at some point in time.
I think this is Wood, right?
And that's what concerns you, because you know it's just the law of averages is going to happen. You just don't want it to be the night. Right. You don't want it to be any night, but you certainly don't want it to be tonight. But the way they're forcing the turnovers and keeping it clean, it worries you a little bit because they've been so clean.
So clean, Drew, with just that 1 interception in Minnesota, and quite frankly, it did not harm them. But it's a big one tonight in the NFC South. It is the Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. The 9-1 Saints looking to make it 10-1 to keep pace with the LA Rams. John will be for postgame with Caroline. I will be in the locker room. Again, you can check that out on NewOrleansSaints.com or on the Facebook page as well. Everyone, happy Thanksgiving. Have a great day.